And the night before I came in, I was at the officers club at Clark Air Force Base, and I met a couple of young guys who were coming back from Vietnam, who had been there for about 6 months. And we were sitting having drinks at the officers club. And this one young guy was telling me, he said, oh yeah, we flew all kinds of missions into Hanoi. He said, I was the wingman for my squadron commander. In other words, he's flying here and the squadron commander is in front of him. And we were over Hanoi, and a SAM came up and hit my leader right in the belly of the airplane and killed him. Plane exploded. And I'm sitting there, having had no combat experience at all, and I'm sitting there listening, because I'm on the way over. And I'm sitting there listening to these stories. I said, you got to be kidding. He said, no. He was there 1 minute and gone the next. This guy was only like 24 years old. So we had a lot of drinks, so I wasn't feeling that great when I got off the plane in Thailand. But when I got off the plane in Thailand, my squadron had been there for a week, and they were flying missions into Hanoi. So they would fly with about 24 Phantoms, and the Phantoms would fly in flights of 4. You know, there are 4 airplanes, and then 4 airplanes, and you'd have 6 flights of 4. So I got off the airplane, and the squadron commander came to meet me. And we were standing there on the ramp, and there was a strike flight coming back from Hanoi. So, I mean, I had been a peacetime flyer. Never been shot at, right? So the planes were coming in. There were 4 planes, and there were 4 more planes, and then there were 3 planes. And the squadron commander looked at me. We looked up. He looked at me. He said, MiGs. I said, oh my God, this is the real thing. One of those guys had been shot down. We had 8 guys shot down when I was there. That's when I realized this is for real.
I gotta ask, what is the procedure for dodging a SAM?
That's a very interesting question. Well, they were firing SAM-2s, SA-2s at us, which were not as sophisticated as the later models. But if you didn't see a SAM coming, it would hit you. It would hit the airplane. And a SAM was like a telephone pole, but as long as a telephone pole, and it would fly at probably Mach 3, about 2,000 miles an hour. But the objective was to see the SAM, because if you didn't see it, you were in trouble. So you'd have the strobes. I told you about the strobes on the gear. You know, if you had that on, you would know what direction it was coming from. We didn't have a lot of SAMs fired at us because the MiGs were chasing us. And they didn't want to fire a SAM and maybe hit one of their own airplanes. But the procedure was, you know, the Phantom was a high G maneuvering airplane. So you could pull as much as 7 or 8 Gs with a Phantom. And you could go negative G, 2 negative Gs, where you'd rise up in the seat, right? So the procedure, if you saw a SAM coming, you'd have to wait, all right? Let's say a SAM is coming up from 2 o'clock, right? You're flying along. You'd have to wait until it got within about a half mile, which is pretty close. I mean, that's very close. You push the stick over, negative G, right? And then you pull back about 6 Gs. So the SAM would follow the negative G. It was radar guided. It would dip, and then when you pulled the 6 Gs, the SAM couldn't recover to come up and hit you. At least you didn't think it would. But you had to see the missile coming to do that. So, and the hard part was waiting until it got to within a half mile, because if you maneuvered too soon, the SAM would correct, it might hit you. So it was a negative G and then a rapid application once the missile started to deviate from the path. But we only had one guy who was injured by a SAM where he had a SAM explode outside his cockpit, and it came through the glass, and he had glass on his flight suit. When he came back, he had pieces of the canopy on his flight suit, and there were shards of explosive material out of the SAM in his cockpit, but he didn't get hurt, thank God. But he said, "Hey, look, I got glass all over my flight suit here," so it's a little dicey. But
How do you deal with the MiGs?
well, the MiGs. See, I had been through Top Gun training in the Navy, so I knew all the characteristics of MiGs, what their capabilities were, what the weapon systems could do. So, but we had to get to the target. So they would fly MiGs up behind us to attack us. And the MiGs fired heat-seeking missiles. They were called the ATOL, okay? They were copies of missiles we had, but they weren't very capable. So if you applied G to the airplane, if that missile was coming at you, at your tailpipe, and you pulled 2 or 3 Gs, the missile couldn't track, okay? The people we had shot down were shot down by ATOLs, by heat-seeking missiles, but they didn't see them coming. They didn't know they were behind them. So they were in a maneuver where the missile could track. But if you knew someone was in firing range within 1.5 miles behind you, you could maneuver and pull, we could pull 6 or 7 Gs if we had to, and the missile wouldn't track, okay? But you had to know that there were missiles in the air in order to evade them. But, so they weren't very capable. Now the missiles we had, it wouldn't matter how many Gs the opponent's airplane would pull. If they pulled 6 Gs, they would still get hit because our missiles were so much better, which is still the case now, even flying against Russian airplanes. Our weapon systems are so much more sophisticated than theirs. It wouldn't be much of a contest, really. But if you didn't see them coming, that's how they shot most people down.